So in 10.2, just like 10.1, there's a notes worksheet and then there's a homework worksheet. We're only going to get through the notes worksheet for section 2. When you guys come to school on Friday, we will pick up and do some more notes for the notes worksheet, things that we should have picked up after we do the notes worksheet. Now, the biggest difference between section 2 and section 1 is that the form is different. If I think about section 1, it was in standard form ax squared plus bx plus c. This is a completely different form. It looks like this: y equals a parenthesis x minus h parenthesis squared plus k. When you learned slope-intercept form back in Math 1, or even Advanced Math 8, or going back into 7th grade math, you learned y equals mx plus b. Each of those letters stood for something. The same thing goes for vertex form. Each thing is going to represent something. The A is going to represent something. The H is going to represent something. The K is going to represent something. You're going to see exactly what each of these things do on this worksheet. A is the number in front of the parentheses. How many of these x minus h squares do you have? If there's nothing there, there is an invisible one. H has a negative sign in front of it. Notice how this H has a negative there, and when I think about H is the positive version of that. Meaning, if this has a negative sign, I change the opposite sign to figure out what H is. If this has a positive sign, I need to think that it is the opposite of that, and I would use a negative for H. K has a plus sign, so therefore it should be the same sign. If it was a negative 2, then K is a negative 2. I'm going to explain in a second. This is how you're going to see the equations. Let me show you what the worksheet looks like. You guys have this worksheet in front of you. If I look at the equation, I have a 2, I have a minus 5 squared plus 3. You're not going to do anything to the equation. But by looking at these equations, you're going to eventually be able to graph them, just like you did on worksheet 1. Now here's what we're going to do to figure out these things. What we're going to do is we're going to go to Desmos again, except this time when we choose the parabolas, we're not choosing the standard form, we're going to choose the vertex form. When we choose that, this is what happens. Let's see if I can pull it up. Over here, when we choose that menu, parabolas vertex form, you're going to see that that same format, that same formula is over here, and they have new sliders. You have an A slider, you have an H slider, you have a K slider. And it's going to produce a parabola. And you're going to play around with it. So let me click over here, go back to this. If you are doing number 1, let's look at number 1. You have a 2, a minus 5, and a plus 3. I can make my A value 2. My H value is the opposite of this. Remember how it's minus H? What are we subtracting? We're subtracting a 5. Don't think of it as a negative 5. Think of it as the opposite of a minus 5. It's a positive 5. The K value is the same as this plus 3, which is 3. Now what you can do with this is we can take the A value, the H value, and the K value, and we can plug it into that sliding function. You said the A value was 2. The H value was a 5. And the K value was a 3. I'm going to I'm going to label HK. And what I see is I have a parabola that kind of acts the same way that the other one did. If you remember what the A value did in section 1, you'll notice that this is a little bit skinnier than a x squared graph. It's more narrow. But if you look at the H and the K, they are very specific points on the graph. Do you notice that this is where the minimum is? Is where the H and the K is? That's because it is your vertex. As you go to your other problems, your vertex right now, it says you don't have to fill this in just yet, but eventually you're going to notice that the H and the K are going to be the place where there's the vertex. I want to jump to a couple different ones. I want you to know that the A value on number 4, the A value is a 1. But the K value, what we're adding behind here is we're adding nothing to that group. So the K value is actually a 0 there. I know it seems weird when we have invisible numbers. Some people go, why is there a 0? Why is there a 1? Because you have one of these squared terms. You have nothing being added to the squared term. So that's where the K value is. And then so the H would be the opposite of this -1. It would be a positive 1. And if you played with that, if you plug in an A of 1, an H of 1, and a K of 0, let's do that real quick. An A of 1. An H of 1. And a K of 0. I think you can figure out where your vertex is going to be. It says it right here on Desmos. And eventually you might just skip Desmos eventually, which is where we want you to go. We want you to eventually be able to see the equation and kind of have an idea of what the graph would look like. That's the beginning stages of Unit 10. As you do these, you will hopefully be able to start answering these questions. If you are not able to do so, then maybe you should do Part B first. Part B is on the next page. Part B asks you, well, what is A? I'm hoping you look at number 1 and you say, oh, the A is going to be a 1. What is H? H is the opposite of this -1. It's a positive 1. What is K? K is the positive 2. You can use Desmos to graph all that. 1, 1, 2. 1, 1, 2. And when you do that, you'll see the parabola and you'll see what the vertex should be. You go over to your graph. 1, 2. And you're kind of making a sketch of it. Your domain are your x values. You use all the x values. That's why we'll say it's all reals. Our range. We're not using all the y's though. We're only using on the y-axis. We have points that are this point and above. I can say its y is greater than or equal to 2. And then I used red for mine. You can decide what color you used, whether it's pencil or blue or black and things like that. So you will hopefully be able to go through all these and answer the questions. That's my thought. And I'm going to give you the rest of the period to do that and finish up worksheet 1. Send your notes right there.